With that, I'm delighted to introduce Linda Stephen with Unfolding Communications. Linda, thank you for being here today and for bringing our donuts, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm Linda Stephen. I have worked in public relations for 20 years. I've worked with United Nations. I've launched events around the world. I've worked with Fortune 500 groups, public companies, authors, artists, book publishers, entrepreneurs, startups. When I lived in New York, I worked with lots of internet and technology startup companies. For the last 2 years, I've focused on clients in Lincoln instead of national, so I don't have to travel as much, and pretty much authors, artists, and entrepreneurs, people who make something from nothing. Steve, I could have you all here every single day for the next 2 years and have a different lesson every day. So for 15 minutes, Steve said, what have you learned in 20 years? So here's a few things that are in general about marketing and public relations that can apply whether you're a company of 500 people or if you're an artist, working on half a table in your basement. Here's a few. I will just run through a few things, and people that do it wrong, they just get in trouble. It doesn't matter how big they are, they still get in trouble. So don't launch until you are ready. If that's a technology, if it's a new application, it's a new software, it's a new website. If you have a launch date and you're planning to launch at some conference, for example, have your finish date, like not the day before, but say a month before, or maybe even 2 months before, so you have time to test it. One large children's book publisher that I worked with, they have like a catalog of 800 books or something like that, and they had new software to go with. They were this superhero series that they have, and it wasn't ready by the time they got to Comic-Con. So they had a few bookmarks and no software to show to go that they could, you could read your little early reader books along with the software or something. So like they had this whole plan, but it wasn't ready. And I've, like I said, I worked with technology companies, or if you have a website, just don't launch until, it's all tested. So whatever your product is. Another company I worked with when I was in New York, they were doing self-defense videos for children, like if your child is abducted, how they can get out of the car, how to get out of the back trunk or something. It's kind of scary, but and we set up interviews for them, like in Texas and in Miami, and so they were on TV, but their video wasn't available yet. They planned for it to be available, so you have. You're speaking to 500,000 people, and then there's nothing to buy. It's a wasted opportunity. So make sure that when you're ready to go out, don't talk about the future. This is actually, so I say I work in public relations, which is basically publicity, trying to get out, not through advertising, like paying for a quarter-page ad in the magazine or newspaper, or for an online ad, but, quote, free publicity. So a rule in journalism is that if it's not real, to not talk about it. So I've just seen people be burned in that sense too. You say that your, version 2 of your product is going to be available in 6 months. Well, someone's going to remember that. They're going to come back and say, where is it? Well, you may have just totally abandoned it because your top developer went away or something. So only talk about the present, talk about what you've done now, your current successes. You can, with your small group internally, your supporters, you can share what you're planning on doing, but don't announce it to the world and send off press releases. Look at this week. Nebraska got flooded, so you just don't know what's going to happen. is what's going to impact your reality coming out. Become a thought leader in your community or industry. So one way to do this is to give away your expertise. Don't give away your product. So like, for example, Jeff here, Hines here he is a pharmacist, and he goes into people's homes and helps them figure out how to go from 10 medications, say, down to 5 or something. So perhaps like he could go speak to some senior groups or something like that. Like, what are some things that so share a little bit of your knowledge with people, and then so that they learn to know and trust you. Write byline articles. It takes time. It is not really free. It's just you're not paying for it with cash. Offer to serve on panels or to comment on the TV or radio. And always follow trends in the news. So, like, for example, this week, if you have a service related to emergency response or how to safeguard your important documents, or like are there legal things that, if you're about to be flooded, that you should be considering, or insurance things, like what do you need to take with you in order to prove that, like, you actually owned that cabin or something that went. So how can your business follow in the news? And this is not the week to be announcing just some random thing if you live in Niobrara. Like, if you have a new CD coming out, and then it's just, unless you can tie it to the flooding. Yeah. Know your audience. So, everyone thinks that their audience is everyone out there, but really, are they over 50? Are they over 50 females who have a master's degree? It might be everyone, but in general, if you know your audience, then you can think, now where is your audience? Where do they go for fun? Where do they get information? What kinds of things do they read? What kinds of things do they watch? And so you want to be in front of them. And yes, people have multiple interests. And quarterly, or at least annually, do a SWOT analysis. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses, opportunities? What have you learned about your audience in the last year or in the last quarter? What, for your product, what have been some of your successes, and how can you build on those? How can you get your message out to what you feel is the receptive audience? When you do, like I said, I specialize in getting publicity, news out about your company. And sometimes, like if you're a technology company, yes, then maybe you should be in Fast Company magazine or something like that, or Wired. But people also read other things, maybe Kayaking magazine or something. So one company that I represented in New York was a database company that basically, they were about 30 people. They were a startup, all funded by venture capital money. And they had databases of companies and countries, and their target market were university libraries and big corporate libraries. So some company that's going into Peru needs to know all the data, all the economic data, everything, how many people, how old are the people that live in Peru or something like that. So it's not really all that sexy, but it was real. There was a need for it. And we did get news about them in Information Age and in some of the library trade magazines. But also by spending time with the company, then we learned that their head of IT was from Jamaica. Okay, they were founded by two Jewish friends from New York. It turns out, anyhow, that in their company, it was 30% of their company were non-native born. And they were from all over the world, like from places in Africa and Asia and like the Caribbean and New York. And then while I was working with them, 9/11 happened. So they were actually quiet for a couple months because their offices disappeared. But they had a soccer team at their company, because all these international people that worked at their company liked to play soccer. And we actually got a feature on them because after 9/11, we're talking about how many % of the population are immigrants in the city of New York, and that was the same as for this company. And so the New York Times did a feature on the company and their culture and the soccer team. Now yes, their company got named, their website got named. It wasn't a story, it says, a database company or something like that. A brief half-sentence description of their company, but a whole feature with a photo in the New York Times. So think about what are your quirky stories, and sometimes those are the ways to get in front of your audience, not just your core skill. And I've used that a number of ways. Another company I worked with, basically it was a video company. They sold videos online, but they were the first streaming video company. So 20 years ago, they were streaming videos, but they were ahead of their time, so now they're out of business. They went public, they had to close down. But before they closed down, because the internet was not ready for them yet, but they were streaming videos, and they were in Entertainment Weekly and in Adweek in the New York Times in the technology section. But one of their employees went to go climb Mount Everest and got stuck, like on the backside. And he used his satellite phone. For some reason, the only person he could call was the company. And so he spoke to the CEO, and anyhow, they figured out how to get a helicopter in to save them. So we shared that with the Wall Street Journal work and family columnist, and she wrote about, the company CEO helping their employee on the other side of the world who's, almost died on Mount Everest or something. So she wrote that about, company culture kind of thing. So it just got a broader audience than, say, maybe the people that follow the entertainment, or what's new in video sales and marketing or something. So think about the quirky stories that you you work with or that represent you. Create systems and processes. This is just in general for business, so you don't have to reinvent something or to make a new decision every time. Like once you get big enough, when you're a solo entrepreneur, not too many people are going to be knocking on your door asking for requests for donations to the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or the Red Cross or whoever. But as soon as you have some kind of presence, then lots of charities are going to be knocking on your door. And I'm active as a volunteer in probably like at least 8 different organizations, giving my time and expertise in Lincoln. So I'm not saying don't ever give, but at some point you need to have a process for deciding how to give. So for example, you can have something on your website that people can submit if they want a donation. So figure out different kinds of processes. And if you're doing your bills, some companies pay 60 days after they get the bill. Some pay 30 days after they get the bill. Some pay immediately. They're usually small. So when you sign a contract, figure out what is the billing process, and then adjust your own invoicing to fit that. I had struggles with, we had to do that with some of our clients in order to get paid in a reasonable time. So instead of billing at the end of the month, we switched to billing 15 days before the month started, and then we get paid by about the 15th, because we had to pay all of our people by the end of the month. So figure out some processes for those kinds of things, and yes, I said, like along with that is use contracts. It's getting things on paper so that both sides agree. There's no confusion if someone from the other company leaves, for example, like you have a written record. For about 10 years, I managed a speakers bureau. This is part of my public relations work. So a lot of our clients were on the speakers bureau. And we'd often book a speaker, say, a year in advance, or at least 9 months in advance. And so maybe somebody at the University of Michigan is hiring someone, but whoever is the secretary that's, managing it now, they may leave. And then, but you need to get paid. So if you have a contract, then it's all written down. When is the deposit due? When do you need to deliver photos for your speaking gig so that it can be in their marketing? Just have it all in one place, and it will make things smoother rather than being at the end. You did the speaking gig, your client went and flew off to Atlanta or something, and now they're not getting paid. So, and they're owed $3,000 or $5,000. So use contracts. And do what you do best and outsource the rest. So I'm in theory in marketing. I am also a professional artist. My art is part of art collections around the world. So I have a good eye, and I hire a website designer. Because it's not my core skill, I can do it. In fact, I do it for some of my clients that just can't be bothered, and they need to have a website, so I will do it for them. Whatever it is so you can spend your time on your core skill. I have an accountant. I do all the bookkeeping. I have QuickBooks, but she does my taxes and the W-2s. Generally, if you hire somebody else, like that's what they do every day, and you may be capable of doing it, but it might take you 5 hours to do what they can do in 30 minutes. So maybe you think their rate is expensive, but they know what they're doing and they're efficient. So how much is 5 hours of your time or 8 hours of your time plus frustration, and it's not your joy? So think about that. Yes, and for my art, I have a picture framer that I work with. So I make the art, but I don't do the frames. I don't do the mats. Am I capable of it? Probably. I could clean off the glass and buy standard frames. But that's not my core skill. It's just better to have someone else do those things. So any questions from anyone? Yes, my experience is broad. I've done events, nonprofits, startups, authors, publishers, manufacturers, James Hardy building products. It's fiber cement siding. It's $1 billion company, or $1 billion a year or something like that. Yes?
For people that are just starting out, maybe solopreneurs or small businesses, if you can narrow it down to one thing, what's the one best thing they can do to get their name out there? In your opinion.
Well, now this is what I like to do, for in business meetings. So they need to know who their audience is. And then you figure out how can you get in front of that audience. I'm really good at getting things in the newspaper or something. If you're a nonprofit, I don't know how many nonprofits I've gotten Neighborhood Extra in the last year, maybe 6 or something. So the newspaper, for example, is a great way. But who is your audience? So your audience may not be people that read the paper. So it really depends. I'm trying to think. Yeah, one of my clients is a bronze sculptor in Michigan. And his audience, he would like it to be art galleries on the East Coast. So for that, it's not a big, broad email. It's every single gallery you have to look at. And if they have an art exhibit coming up, then you submit to that. So it's individual and focused, and you send in photos and you send in your art bio to get into like that kind of niche. So that's very different, but the product is different. You know, it's a $10,000, $70,000 bronze sculpture or something like that. And he was not interested in necessarily selling his sculpture. He just wanted to be known. So it depends, what are your goals? I didn't really answer that, but that's it. It really depends on what the business is and who they're trying to reach. Other questions? Yes.
How much do you get involved in some of the newer platforms, social media marketing, that sort of thing?
Well, see, I do mine based on time. Like some people just hire me to meet with them for like 2 hours a month, like twice a month, and I just do coaching. Like I help them make decisions, and then they go off and do their thing because they have a budget of $200 a month or something. So, and maybe I like write one letter for them, a pitch letter or something like that they can send out to help them be a speaker. And some other clients, then, there's a musician I was working with, and he's got a full-time job. He's not focused on making money from his music. So I did his Twitter, and I did his Facebook, and I did his website. But the best thing, I really think like those things should come from at least someone within the company, so that you can like be current, rather than say have a meeting once a month and I find out what's new, or I try and like follow his favorite artists or something like that. It's not quite as active. Yeah.
I just had a comment on that. People on social media want to see you active, because if you're not active, they will stop following you. Because you have no attention span.
Yeah, and I mean, you can decide, what you think is the most valuable use of your time. So I have not yet set up a Facebook page for Unfolding Communications, probably because I'm spending time doing my clients' Facebook pages. And it's not necessarily where my audience is going to come from. You can spend a lot of time on social media and, never get one sale, which does not mean it's not valuable. I work with a lot of authors, and like one children's, I guess she was YA. One author a couple years ago, she had a Lois Lane book. And it was approved by DC Comics. Now, that is a lot of legal to get something from a big entertainment company to be able to use one of their characters. Now, we're not allowed to create any images. So, can't use any of their images, and we can't make any. But she was allowed to write a book about Lois Lane as a teenager, and her friend, he was like Kansas boy, 68 or something like that. Anyhow, they met through this online game, and Superman. It was all this like virtual reality teenage story. But she got lots of responses, not from teenagers necessarily, like through Twitter and Facebook, but from book bloggers and those kinds of things. So it kind of depends on your audience, or if someone like writes a review of you, then please be sure to thank them or share with them. Instead of writing a thank you note, you can share those things via social media. But it kind of depends on your product and who your audience is. But for lots of artists, it's not necessarily, worth, which doesn't mean it's not valuable to do. But don't do it thinking that you're going to sell a $200 piece of art because you're doing so. but people might hear of you, they can easily share it with their friends, and then maybe they'll come to your event. And then maybe someone will buy an art piece. So it's part of the waves. I mean, you throw in a stone, and there's waves that go out. And kind of the more stones that you can throw in, then the more likely that some of those waves will reach the shore, which is where your sales are. Other questions? Yes?
For an author, how important is the publisher as far as the marketing?
Well, not very many publishers support their authors in marketing. They just do the book and then they drop it. Generally, they choose maybe 3 books that they want to push, like a season. So defined as either half a year, like in the spring and the fall, or perhaps quarterly. But generally, I would say like there's spring launches and fall launches. And like I used to work with an architectural design publisher, the Taunton Press, for like about 10 years. And they would usually hire us for 1 or 2 books in the spring. So they may be publishing about 10 new design books, and these are, they have a really great reputation. They're really beautiful coffee style books. Sarah Suzanka, like Not So Big House, anyhow, lots of things about how to design your home or how to design your garden or how to design your kitchen. And they have a great reputation in the industry, but that they would actually pay to have 9 months of PR support going nationally to everywhere in the country. So like those books that got support, then they would get 200 articles or something, or radio things and TV things across the country. And the other books, I don't think they even sent out a press release, which costs like $200. So see if you can find the reputation of the publisher. And the other thing is, for a publisher, can they give you some books that you can share to send out? In order to get reviews, usually you need to share your book with some reviewers. And lots of publishers only give the author 2 books. See if you can negotiate to get 30 books or something like that. Or that they will agree to send out 30 books on your behalf, and you give them the list and the addresses and the letter. That's ideal if they can send it out instead of you doing all the mailing. Yeah.
How do you get this list of reviewers?
Oh, no, these would be people that you would know, or people that you think, like, whatever your book is related to. Let's see, well, like I had The Accessible Home was a book that I did. So for that, I think we did send it to somebody at the AARP, for example. And we sent it to the retirement person at the Wall Street Journal who covered it. And New York Times, I can't remember if they covered that one. I don't think they did. And then we would send it to all of the remodeling writers, the home and garden people across the country who cover like that for their local newspaper or something. And then all of the magazines that cover, Remodeling Magazine and Architectural Digest wouldn't care about it. But so you can look that up. They should, if that's their industry, they should have a list. But it's free, but it takes time. Go to the magazine, find out who are their editors, look up the name, or call, because lots of times an editor might live in Montana, but the magazine's in Washington, D.C. So where do you send the book to? It's a long process. Good question.
Time for one more question. If not, Linda, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. And we have
Yeah, we have the drawing. I first want to give you a Focus Sweet coffee.
Oh,
mug. Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
being here today. So hope you'll enjoy that. And what would you like to draw for first off your list?
Oh, well, we can start with the coaching. So for a coaching meeting, first I send you a questionnaire asking you, like, who is your audience? Who is your, what is your business? What are your goals? Who are your current customers? Like, so I have some idea where you are. Or see your current marketing materials. Okay, and this is Charles Clark, independent broker. Okay, we can talk about your book. Yeah, I've worked with at least like 10 or 11 book publishers. Okay.
All right.
Pardon?
That's my son's book.
Your son's book. Okay. And mostly I've worked with nonfiction. And the next one is one editing service, so proofreading or editing a document like your bio or your web presence. Don Miltner.
That's me.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So send me your document.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. There is no need to run off. You're welcome to hang around as long as you want. Meet somebody new before you leave. Exchange business cards. Again, give me your card if you'd like to be added to our email list. Feel free to wander around the focus suites and look at the businesses that are call this space their home. And check out our drop-in suite. Suite 305 around the corner is available for rent by the hour if you need a temporary space in East Lincoln. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.